Thank you, Charles, so much. It is a great privilege to have you here today, and I'm privileged to be able to introduce our next speaker, and I think that we'll be receiving a lot from him by what we hear today. I have the privilege of introducing Hector L. Rivero, President and CEO of our Texas Chemical Council, what many of us know as TCC. The Texas Chemical Council is the statewide trade association for the chemical industry of Texas. It was founded in 1953, and TCC is the largest U.S. state trade association representing the chemical manufacturers within these areas. Rivero has served as the board of directors of several business associations and organizations, including the Texas Association of Business, Texas Civil Justice League, Texas Taxpayers and Research Association, the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, and the Austin Chamber of Commerce. He is a government affairs professional for over 20 years. Rivero has been instrumental in the passage of major tax reforms, civil justice reforms, environmental laws, and constitutional amendments. Rivero previously served as state government affairs manager for E.I. DuPont de Nemours and was responsible for 15 manufacturing sites and plants in the U.S. Coast region and several research facilities across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. He has 2 children and resides in Austin. Hector is also very active in high school and a college football official, and is past president of the Austin Football Officials Association and member of the Lone Star Conference. Would you help me welcome today Hector Rivero to the podium? Hector, come on. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, wasn't that a great panel we just had? Those plant managers, they were outstanding. They did a fantastic job. As I thought, and I think there's an advancer. Is this my advancer? Okay. I thought, I've sat here yesterday and today and listened to the outstanding presentations that we've had. It's hard to reflect, especially we have a number of students that are here from our local colleges. I think it's important for us to reflect on what an incredible fortune we have to have a region, a state, first of all, that has the incredible resources, a fabulous client, an educated and skilled workforce, and the capability to have the tremendous investment in chemical manufacturing that we do. And I don't want, for the students that are here, I want to make sure y'all do not take for granted that this region is a beacon for innovation for our world. And we hear that yesterday and today we've heard company representatives talk about these incredible chemical products that they make, and these fancy words, polyethylene this, and none of that really matters to most of us as consumers. Of course, it matters a little bit when we get up and we take a shower. It matters when we go into the kitchen and pull food out of the refrigerator and eat. Maybe drive our cars, answer our phones on our, smartphones, watch TV, travel on an airplane, maybe type on a computer at work, that kind. But besides that, maybe even when we're watching our kids, play sports, if we like to hike or run or bike or, camp, other than that, it's really not that important. But really and truly, all of the things we do in life are made possible by the materials and the incredible work of the people in this region and regions throughout the Gulf Coast and Texas. And so as I hear, first of all, this has been an incredible forum, but it's just important to take a moment and recognize what an incredible history we have. Our industry has been here since the 1930s. I refer to it as the original high tech. And we've still been here all this time. We've been a major economic engine for this state and for this country for over 75 years, and that's an incredible accomplishment. So, and I want to just recognize Chad Burke and all the volunteer members of the Economic Alliance for an outstanding job at this forum. Let's give them a hand for what they've done. So today, I'm going to try to, without putting you to sleep, touch on some of the key regulatory and legislative priorities that we have for our industry. But before we do that, I want to give you a little feel for who the chemical industry is. And many of y'all know this, but I have to get on my soapbox and do our little commercial. But we represent 70 member companies, multinational companies that own and operate over 200 manufacturing facilities across the state. $100 billion in physical assets, over 75,000 direct employees, and over 400,000 indirect employees that support our member companies and our sites around the state. Over $1.5 billion in state and local taxes, and we're the #1 state non-energy export with over $47 billion in export. Yes, that's billions with a B. And I know you heard from the Port of Houston yesterday that talked about all the tonnage and the expected increase in product that we're anticipating. As Robert mentioned, we also manage the Association of Chemical Industry in Texas, an extremely important organization, because TCC represents all the companies, all the owner companies that provide the investment and a lot of the work, but you need people to build, operate, and maintain those facilities. And ACIT is a representation of all the contractors, suppliers, vendors, and other service providers that are extremely important to our operations. And so it provides us an umbrella organization that brings contractors, suppliers, as well as owner companies together in promotion of the chemical industry in the state. ACIT has over 400 member companies, contractors, suppliers, and service providers I mentioned, and represent over 400,000 jobs within our industry across the state. So as we look at U.S. chemical industry investment as a whole, to give you some perspective how we compare with Texas, the U.S. chemical industry has over $800 billion of U.S. chemical output, over 70,000 chemical products that are manufactured by facilities. Okay, I want to make sure that's not something bad back there. And this is an important note, especially for the students here that aren't not that familiar with the things that we do, but 96% of all manufactured products are touched by the business of chemistry. So that's pretty incredible to believe. Over 800,000 American jobs created by the industry. There's a 7x multiplier. For every one direct job within industry, there are 7 jobs created to support that job. And that is a trend that is higher than most industries. Average salary in industry across the country is over $90,000 a year. 191 billion, dollars in exports. It represents 14% of all U.S. exports that are there. So as we look at new U.S. chemical investment, there are 238 projects that have been announced across the U.S., over $145 billion of new investment, 414,000 jobs, and that may be construction as well as permanent jobs associated with that, and $293 billion in new economic output associated with that investment. And that's really important. Most of that investment is locating around shale formations around the United States, but the vast majority of them are along the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast, with a large number of them right here in Texas and in this particular region. So that's a pretty good snapshot of those. And of course, the reason they're locating around shale plays is the ethylene that we're getting from the shale gas formations are really an important feedstock for our industry, and having an abundant, low-cost supply of feedstock is vital to all of the industry expansion that we're seeing. So it's a blessing in that way. So in perspective, when we're looking at that investment in Texas, we're looking at 84 projects with over $45 billion of investment, over 150,000 jobs that are associated with that new investment. And that, again, is construction as well as permanent jobs, and resulting in almost $2 billion in new state tax revenue for the state of Texas. Now, as a whole, Texas, when you look at Texas, this is an excellent slide that shares with you how important our industry is here. We're the largest chemical producing state in the country, over $165 billion in revenue, $5 billion annually that is spent by our industry just in capital improvements, maintenance, things of that sort. And we're the #1 non-energy export, as I mentioned, with $47 billion of annual investments. Over 75,000 direct jobs and over 400,000 indirect jobs, or 500,000 I think we have on that slide. And $8.1 billion in payroll associated with this investment that we currently have in the state at 200 plus locations. Our industry pays nearly $3 billion in state and local taxes currently, over $5.5 billion in federal taxes. And obviously, Texas is uniquely situated for incredible infrastructure that's vital for our industry. So, the Chemical Council, for those of y'all that many of y'all are members and work with us a great deal, but for those that don't know us very well, we're essentially the voice of the chemical industry in Austin. We walk the halls of the Capitol. We make sure that your state elected officials, your senators and representatives are very aware of the investment, the importance of our industry, the jobs, what our needs are, how we can remain competitive. And many of the reasons that we've been able to attract the investment that we have in this state is because of the work of the chemical industry, the Chemical Council, and a lot of other supporting organizations like Economic Alliance, East Harris County Manufacturers Association, Bay Area Economic Partnership, and others, and our chambers of commerce that all work together to help promote our industry and make sure that we can remain competitive. It is very competitive nationally as well as globally because we are a global industry. We track dozens of lawsuits that are ongoing nationally and at the state level that potentially have impact for our industry. So Martha Landwehr, our general counsel, who is here, spends a great deal of her time just tracking all the lawsuits and communicating to our members potential impact that those lawsuits would have. And then, of course, we're actively involved in numerous regulatory activities at the federal level and state level that are critical for our industry. Some of these include Tosca Reform. You heard a little bit about this yesterday, but we are so fortunate that we've been able to finally pass Tosca Reform in Congress. The Toxic Substance Control Act was finally revised, and it essentially will bring some certainty to make sure that the products that are being manufactured in this country are safe and that people know that they're safe. And so it's a very important effort that our industry supported along with environmental organizations that actively worked with our industry and our friends at the American Chemistry Council to get that deal passed. Another important regulatory component is obviously the federal ozone standard, which y'all may know the last year got reduced from 75 ppb to 70 ppb. What does that mean? That just means it's going to be tougher to be able to meet the standards in areas like Houston and Beaumont, Port Arthur, and down in Brazoria County and in other parts of the state. To make sure that we're operating within our permits and doing it safely and trying to meet the air quality standards that are there. So there's litigation that's still involved with the new ozone standard that we're actively watching and involved in. But our member companies are already doing what they can do in order to try to make sure they can continue to operate. And it's really important to understand that having this new standard is essentially moving the goal line further for Houston. Houston has done, the Harris County, or what's called the Harris, Galveston, Brazoria County non-attainment area, has done an outstanding job of actually improving air quality. Industry alone has spent over $10 billion to reduce NOx emissions in the Harris, in this non-attainment area by over 80%. Tremendous improvement, and there's actually a map that we have that shows where we were 20 years ago and how far we've come and how clean. We've met almost every single existing standard, and we're almost in compliance until EPA decided to move the goal line further away. So the reason that's important is because as we're competing with other states and other cities for investment, the availability of permits and the credits that you need in order to be able to operate are critical. So if it's going to be much more costly for a company to be able to create an investment in Houston or in Galveston, Brazoria County compared to another state or another city, that can be an important economic development factor. So it's extremely important. Another key regulatory issue that's tied to that is emissions banking and trading. As our companies are trying to comply with the new ozone standard, we're looking for creative ways to make sure that we can get credits for reduction of emissions. Many of y'all have heard of the program that the Obama administration, federal government, as well as the state of Texas has initiated. It's better known as Cash for Clunkers, because with over 70% of the ozone being generated by our cars, it's really important that we have the maximum efficiency in our transportation modalities. We've done everything we can with school buses and with city buses and with rail and marine and even at our airports, but we really need to do something about our cars that we drive every day. And what we found is Detroit has made significant advancements with the efficiency of engines, but we've got to get the old cars off the road. So the federal government and the state have created incentives that's referred to as Cash for Clunkers, where they'll pay you a credit in order to get your car off the road, salvage the old car, get you into a more efficient car, and to help us with the ozone problem. So emissions banking and trading, we're working with other industries to try to see if we can make this happen. TCQ is proposing new rules that will establish a process for generating credits from area and mobile sources. And so we're looking at every opportunity we can to afford our companies to be able to operate within permits and continue to bring investment to the state. Another key issue that we're tracking is the Ethylene Mac. This is a federal regulatory action, and MAC stands for Maximum Achievable Control Technology. This is going to be a regulation that's going to be proposed, potentially adopted next year. And it's going to have significant impact on our industry. And so we're watching it closely. We're working with the EPA and with state regulators to make sure that we understand it and that we can help in the implementation of this new regulation. And finally, risk management planning, or the risk management program that we have. After there's an executive order by President Obama that's requiring that we address how we're dealing with risk management planning, and they're looking at accidental release prevention requirements and a litany of other things so that we can make sure that the general public and our government regulators are comfortable that we continue to operate safely, are protective of our employees, and of course the communities in which we operate. They're there. Another key component that the Chemical Council works on has to do with legislative. Obviously, I mentioned the state capitol. You've got 31 state senators and 150 state representatives. We are fortunate that we have a number of state representatives, many of them that were recognized here this morning, that understand our industry, that know the people that work there, that know the contractors that service those sites, and they're strong champions for our industry, and we're fortunate to have those people. But a lot of the state elected officials that represent us don't really know enough about our industry. They're those people that say they're alkaline, I don't know what that is, but as long as I can wash my hair and drive my car and all that stuff. And so it's important for us to be able to provide a role to help educate them about the importance of our industry. And I keep telling them, if we can just have, 18-wheelers coming out of the plants with Bluebell ice cream on them, everybody would know what's coming out of there, right? But it's kind of hard to really know what's actually coming out of those plants. So it's our job to help educate the elected officials and make sure they understand how important our industry is, how important the investment is, and the key issues that face our industry that can determine whether or not we can continue to operate profitably, continue to hire new people, and create the jobs that we do within our industry. So from a legislative standpoint, the legislature comes back in January. The Texas legislature meets every other year, odd-numbered years for 140 days. So we're up again here January of 2017. And already there's been a tremendous amount of work from legislative interim committees that have been meeting that are going to tee up a lot of issues that are important to our industry as well as the entire state. First of all, talking about the state budget. The state budget, we have one of the largest. Our state budget is bigger than many, many small countries around the world. It's a very complicated, very expensive. We have a very diverse economy, and we're a very big state. Obviously, with oil prices being down and sales tax revenue being down, the legislature is anticipating a tough fiscal year for the next biennium. And so the governor, Speaker of the House, and Lieutenant Governor have already issued a letter to all the state agencies as they're developing their budget for the next biennium, which would be for the 2018-2019 biennium, for them to bring in their budget with a 4% cut. So they're asking all the agencies to tighten up the belt. With the exception of a few key government programs that are tied to federal funding, we're going to see a lot of activity to try to cut the budget. So that's going to be interesting. And that is hand-wringing for the elected officials that want to make sure that they have the critical services that are necessary, but we are required to have a balanced budget, and they always do a very good job on that. So as a result of that, there's a lot of activity there, and we need to make sure that that there's not going to be anything onerous on us as consumers, people that work in industry, and for our companies as well, that's going to create more fees, more taxes that would make us less competitive globally. In addition to that, the Texas Senate is looking at programs to reduce property taxes and look at franchise taxes. And while our industry, as capital-intensive industries, we're very reliant on property taxes. We pay a tremendous amount of property taxes. In fact, business as a whole pays 63% of all the business taxes in the state, and property taxes are a tremendous portion of that. So we obviously watch those hearings and that deliberation closely. There are initiatives to try to reduce property taxes. There's a number of proposals that are there. Our role is to communicate with the legislators, make sure they know our perspectives. We're not asking we understand where the state's at, so we're not out there pursuing property tax relief, but we want to make sure if they're going to do something, they do something that is fair and balanced and equitable for all Texans and all businesses as well as residential taxpayers. So that's a critical component that we talked about. Economic development. I talked about how important it is to have strong economic development programs. Because Texas is one of the highest property tax states in the country, the state has to create programs that will entice new investment. And one of the critical programs that we rely on tremendously are Chapter 312 and Chapter 313 agreements. These are they refer to the tax code, the state tax code. And these agreements are essentially negotiated agreements with our cities and with our school districts to help freeze or abate certain taxes for a period of time so that we can start new investment, get that investment mature, and then eventually pay full freight on those taxes. So that has been a real critical economic development tool that we want to make sure that we continue to protect. And so we're very watchful and protective of that issue. Coastal Spine Initiative. How many folks in the room have heard of Coastal Spine? Okay, about half of you. So, no, it's not my back problems. It's not. Obviously, by living on the coast, we're susceptible to major storm events, hurricanes, and obviously our industry, before they build a plant along the Gulf Coast, we clearly, acknowledge the region and the environment that we're in, and our facilities are built, engineered, and designed to withstand major storm events. But of course, the people that work at our plants, that keep them operating, and the people in our communities that we support, your homes may not be built to those standards. And so we want to, as an industry, we want to be supportive of efforts to help protect our region from major storm events in the future. So the Coastal Spine is an initiative that has been fostered for a number of years now, ever since Hurricane Ike and Hurricane Rita. It's been an initiative that has been fostered to look at new technologies that will create a protective coastal barrier for our region and protect the 8 million people that live in the upper Texas coast region, one of the largest population centers in the country, and protect not only our investment, but our people, and hopefully protect our lives as well. And so they're proposing an Ike Dike That's one of the terms they refer to it as, but I like to refer to it as to a coastal spine. And it's essentially an extension of the Galveston seawall that will go all across the region, protect the Houston Ship Channel, and protect the entire region from storm surge. If we can protect the region from storm surge, we can save billions of dollars in loss of property and hopefully prevention of injury and loss of life. So we are extremely supportive. State Senator Larry Taylor from down in this region has been a champion on this issue. He's been working with the University, Texas A&M University in Galveston, and also Rice University, who have done a lot of research on this, and our industry is actively supporting and engaged on this initiative. This one really quickly, we make a little bit of plastic resin in our industry, just a little bit. And obviously things like plastic pipe that you may have in your sprinkler systems, but also more commercial plastic pipe that's used for water supply and for wastewater facilities is extremely important. And the quality and the cost savings associated with plastic pipe is very competitive. However, we've learned that different governmental entities, local governments, have discriminatory ordinances or provisions in place that restrict or that more discriminate against certain types of competitive products. And so obviously our industry wants to make sure that we even the playing field and make sure that cities and counties have the ability to consider all the performance values of all the products that are available in the areas of water supply and wastewater supply. So we are supportive of open competition for plastic pipe, which obviously translates in a lot of potential investment for our industry. And transportation infrastructure is extremely important. You heard the Port of Houston talk yesterday and others about all this new investment. I talked about the 84 projects. Most of those 84 projects are under construction, and we're going to start seeing the throughput of that new investment as early as next year. In fact, there's anticipation of a tremendous amount of new resin coming from manufacturing facilities here in this region and across the state beginning in 2017. And that's going to have an added strain to our already congested transportation infrastructure, roads, rail, as well as water. We're trying to work with the port to make sure that we support their efforts to widen and deepen the port. And also, we need to make sure the Corps of Engineers can work with us to make sure that our piers and our docks are actually deep enough to be able to bring in the barges and the ships we need to be able to bring in raw materials and send out product. So that's critical. Making sure that we have rail access and capacity and that we're prepared for the increase in tonnage, as well as making sure we have good road infrastructure. And so we want to work with the state and federal government as well as our local communities to make sure that we have the right transportation infrastructure to keep us moving, but also continue to thrive with our investment that we're seeing. And TERP, the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan. With everything I talked about with ozone, I mentioned that our industry is a very small piece of the ozone puzzle, and obviously cars are a huge piece, but the state of Texas has been very creative at looking at ways that it can help to reduce emissions. And we have to reduce emissions from cars to make any headway. But the state of Texas doesn't have regulatory authority over cars. That's a federal government authority. But the state of Texas and working with the TCEQ have come up with an incredible program called the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan that enable us to create programs in support of our local communities that will make reductions from mobile source emissions. Things like school bus diesel engine retrofits, changing at our airports, changing from diesel equipment to electric equipment. Same thing with rail, same thing with Marines, as well as off-road vehicles, things, construction vehicles. But we want to do more things dealing with cars in non-attainment areas, and TERP is an incredible component, and we have been a strong supporter of TERP and continue to support the initiatives to make sure it doesn't, that the TERP funds aren't rated and used for other things that actually don't help us reduce emissions in this region. So that's extremely important. And we talked a little bit over the last 2 days about workforce development. Obviously, with all this new investment, we're going to need new construction workers, new trades. It's really critical, and the state of Texas has really worked with us with revisions under House Bill 5 to create flexibility in our school system, allow our school districts to actively work with our community colleges and our junior colleges to make sure that there's dual credit opportunities, that there is alignment, that there's good counseling for our students, for our parents. But in addition to the new expansions, many of our facilities, I mentioned our facilities have been here for over 75 years. And many of them have had people that have been there 30 and 40 years and that are approaching retirement age. So attrition at our existing facilities is also a key factor that that's important for workforce. So replacing the folks and operators and engineers that have been working at our plants that are going to be retiring, we need skilled, educated workforce to come in and save the day. And so workforce continues to be a high priority for our industry. So that kind of gives you a little snapshot on the legislative and regulatory piece. I want to close kind of going back to what I talked about at the beginning. You know, we kind of take for granted in this region how important our industry is. And, you know, last time I shared a little presentation with y'all. Y'all know I always like to talk about how chemistry touches our lives. Well, I want to follow in that theme, but this time what I want to do is I want to just touch on some chemistry innovations that have changed the world. And these are things that, you know, we may take for granted, but they really have changed the world. The first is chlorine, fertilizer, plastic, and nylon, okay? These are just 4 of many products that are manufactured within our industry, not only in this region, but across the globe. But they're really 4 critical innovations that have really changed the world. Let me start with chlorine. Safe drinking water. You know, we take it for granted. We turn on the water and we have nice, clean, safe drinking water. We don't even think about it. We go to the fridge and we open a bottle of water and it's safe. It wasn't always the case. In fact, before cities started routinely treating drinking water and disinfecting it with chlorine, thousands perished every year from waterborne diseases such as cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and hepatitis A. And today, across the world, significant strides in public health and the quality of life are directly linked to the adoption of drinking water chlorination. So this was deemed one of the significant public health advancements of all time. Obviously, it's critical for eliminating waterborne diseases. And this didn't actually start in the United States until 1918. When the U.S. Treasury Department actually called for all public drinking water to start being treated with chlorination. Again, we take it for granted today, made possible by our industry, so extremely important. Synthetic fertilizer. You know, throughout history, you know, we've relied on manure, whether it's cow manure or fowl, chicken, turkey, whatever, as a key source of fertilizer. But the introduction of synthetic fertilizer by our industry really changed the world and is feeding the world. And we take it for granted today, but it wasn't always the case. In fact, the definition of a city, if y'all ever go and look at the actual definition of a city, the definition of a city is a population or accumulation of people that live together that do not provide their own food supply, okay? And if you think about it, that's how we came to be. Until we were able to actually get food from the farms to the cities, it was impossible. Everyone relied on raising their own food. So our industry began, or actually some chemists back in the day began synthesizing nitrogen and ammonia to create synthetic fertilizers that provided higher crop yields and improved nutrition values that really helped sustain our population growth, that improved our birth rates, and also sustain the population growth that we have seen over the last 100 years. So these are extremely important and critical. Plastic, again, another thing we take for granted. But if you were to go through your house and count up all the things that are plastic in your home and how important it is in your life, we take it for granted. But plastics have transformed modern life. Developed in 1907, Plastic is a versatile material that's used in a multitude of applications and thousands of products. And again, we take it for granted, but it's all around us. It makes our cars lighter. It makes our all the toys that we get to play with. It's just extremely important to our society. And nylon. Nylon is another really important product. It's one that I'm a nerd this way, but I look at the stuff I buy at the store and I'm like, oh, that's nylon. That's cool. It's a durable and flexible synthetic polymer. Initially, it was created to substitute for silk. Back in World War I, all of the parachutes that our military used were made of silk. Now think about how many scarves and ties that would make, right? But silk, most of the silk we got from Japan, and it became very, very expensive after World War I. And America and the military was looking for a cheap and better alternative, a more sustainable alternative for silk. And so nylon was invented in the 1930s by Wallace Carruthers of DuPont, and it became a critical product for our military efforts in World War II, not only replacing silk for parachutes, but it was used in tires and tents, ropes, and ponchos for our military. But what's funny is back in the 1930s and 40s, in the 1940s in particular, it also replaced silk pantyhoses. And hopefully none of you in this room ever had to wear silk pantyhoses, but they were really hot. And so DuPont was located, headquartered in Wilmington, Delaware, and they would line up at the pharmacies to be able to buy the allotment of nylon pantyhoses. The ladies would line up. They had to actually show proof of residency in Delaware in order to be able to buy them because there was such a high demand for them. But, we take that for granted today, right? But there are thousands of products. Our bulletproof vests and armor that protect our military are made with innovations of nylon that are more lightweight than having plated steel or other applications, but also for our police. Textiles, athletic shoes and equipment, our toothbrush, the bristles of our toothbrush, the carpets that we walk on, unless they're wool, they're made with nylon and more durable. And the backpacks that our kids are carrying around, the jackets we wear when we're skiing, and even and a number of other rain jackets as well as warmth jackets that are there that provide a barrier for us. So extremely important. And these 4 items are just an example that chemistry really makes our world better. And so, every time I see you, I'm going to try to give you an example of how important chemistry is. So, just bear with me on that piece. So, again, it's a tremendous opportunity to be with y'all again. I want to congratulate Chad and all the volunteers and sponsors of the Economic Alliance for the incredible work they've done to bring this great august group together to celebrate our industry and to keep everybody updated on the important things we do. So thank you very much, and good to be with you.